Howdy, friends. The degree's in economics. That's the one of the three, for anyone who's wondering. Cool. So let's talk about breaking stuff. I've worked in the startup space in a lot of different industries, in media, marketing, agency, recruitment, most recently fintech and healthcare. And in all of those industries, regardless of where you're at, the goal is to scale the product, just scale up the business. And then whenever something breaks, just kind of figure it out and hope for the best. But I've actually found in all of those industries that you can really most effectively scale the product and the business by scaling the experience around what happens when stuff goes wrong. So today, we're going to put aside completely our product, doesn't matter what it is, and we're only going to focus on the user experience of incident response. And I'm going to take you through an example of what we did at Row, which is my current company. And in doing so, I'll start off with where we started, which was a bit of user research. And so we looked at the incident response model in a common industry, which is superheroes and comic books. So let's walk through this panel by panel and understand the superhero incident response model as part of the user research for our own model. So we start off with Clark Kent, aka Superman. He's chilling in Metropolis at the Daily Planet, and he suddenly gets a really vague signal that, hey, something's wrong. And because he has supervision and X-ray vision and super hearing, he is able to understand immediately what he needs to do and where to go. So without a moment's notice, he is up and transforming himself into Superman, and he's on his way. He flies off into action, totally solo, doesn't need any backup. He immediately arrives where he needs to go and addresses the situation without a moment's hesitation. He knows exactly what to do. Dives in, knocks heads, 6 panels or less, the incident is completely resolved. There's minimal wrap-up, a quick article in the Daily Planet, something like that, but we're pretty set. So this incident model, it seems really nice, right? It's pretty quick, efficient, doesn't involve a lot of people. So how do we apply this to engineering? We don't. Absolutely, we do not at all. The model breaks down very, very quickly. There's no out-of-office plan for Superman. And, I mean, who fixed the busted roof? He just, broke through there. No one did anything about it. And I get it. This is meant to be entertainment, and it's fantasy. But this model is actually the incident response model a lot of startups are using right now. So let's take it from the professional comics to my slightly less professional comics. So I've been employee number N, where N is less than 10. And when you have a small team, you wear a lot of hats. Or, because we're going to keep this metaphor rolling today, a lot of capes and spandex. The superhero model is the de facto model. You're working a lot of long hours, let's admit it, so it's actually really likely you're going to be available pretty much 24/7. And because there's only a small group of folks who are working on the code base, they're actually very likely to know exactly what's going on with a vague signal of, oh, hey, actually, yeah, I just pushed that, I know exactly what it is. They don't need too much information to know what to do. So when things break, these are the folks to call. And so you scale the business, fix things as they break, and the business grows. And so now you have a larger organization. And as you onboard new folks, you keep using the same model. You teach everyone, hey, when something breaks, you go to these people because they're the ones who are going to fix it. And this is when you start to build that superhero brand within your organization. The names of specific employees start to become as common as names of different systems or frameworks that you use. And there's really no incentive to change the model because it's working. If you think about Metropolis, how hard do you think the police in Metropolis are really, really training when there's a dude who's going to get there before them, has laser vision, and will resolve the issue really before they can arrive on scene? It just doesn't make sense. The incentives aren't there. And it's the same for your organization. So you continue to scale. And if you don't change this process, you're going to find one day that you're in a company of 100 plus individuals, but whenever something goes wrong, it's always those same small people, those 2 or 3 people who are always jumping in and in again and again to resolve issues. And eventually you hit a problem because those folks aren't heroes, they're humans, which means that sometimes they don't show up. It's really only a matter of time before the hero doesn't show up because they're out of office, because they've straight up left the company, or because the business is actually scaled to the point where they don't have the superpowers anymore. They don't actually know that specific area or what to do. And we never hit this critical incident at Row where we had a lot of collateral damage or anything like that, but we knew we were getting close. And that's when we got our signal that we needed to make a change if we really wanted to continue to scale both our incident response and the business. The signal that we got was this internal metric, which was a joke until we realized, oh, this isn't a joke anymore. It was called TTN, which was time to, and then the first initial of the first name of a specific employee. And it was the time between an incident start and when we would have to call that specific person in. We were at a TTN of like 15 minutes. It was not good. And we realized that not only, we didn't want to extend the metric, we wanted to eliminate it entirely. We needed to set up a system where we could fully resolve complex incidents without calling in the heroes. And so we needed to embark on our user experience design. So to do so, we had to understand our landscape, what we were working with, which is the city of Rotropolis, our sprawling landscape here. Ro, for those who aren't familiar, is direct-to-patient telemedicine, which means we're dealing with intake of patient health information, we're dealing with prescriptions, provider EMRs, pharmacy fulfillment, lab diagnostics, shipping, then security and comms and IT and legal and everything in between. It's a huge city, and it's really intimidating for one person to be in charge of taking over that huge city. So we needed to build a user experience that we could onboard a lot of folks so that they were able to maintain this large landscape. I will pause here, since we are talking about incidents and healthcare, to say that everything I'm talking about today is technical incidents. If there were ever anything where someone was having a medical emergency, that would always be routed to local medical providers via 911. That out of the way, let's talk about what models we can use to start to cover this landscape. One model came up really, really early, which was, what if we just didn't have incidents? What if we just wrote really great tests and had really great coverage, and then if nothing broke, we wouldn't have to worry about this problem? And if that were the case, I'll do a false end here, yeah, we could call it a day. But it's actually more likely that an engineer with X-ray vision would crash through the window of your building than you would never have incidents. You could have perfect QA and perfect releases and the best monitoring and deployment. Something's going to go wrong. We're all humans. There's human error. There's vendor failures. There's malicious actors. You're going to need to build this incident response model. So where do we start? Let's start back with our superheroes. And you may be saying, Plum, did you just pick this aesthetic because it matches your shoes? Maybe. But also, the shortcomings of the incident response model, of the hero incident response model, are our success criteria for building a really good, scalable user experience for incident response. The criteria are observability, because we can't rely on vague signals to understand what's going on. Distributed ownership, because no one person can or should have all of the superpowers. Teamwork, because no one should be flying in solo. Planning for complexity, because not everything's going to be simple as knocking heads. And psychological safety, because we're dealing with humans, not heroes, and they need the space to be able to do what they need to do and not have to feel like they have to be perfect under pressure. So let's break these criteria down and see how it happened in practice in the experience that we built. When you think about crime fighting in a distributed model, you think of the neighborhood watch, which we use for both detection and response. The neighborhood watch model is the concept of having direct ownership assigned to different owners of different parts of the application, which seems like a no-brainer. If you're going to be the person who's pushing code to a specific area, yeah, it makes sense that you're the person who's most likely going to break it and therefore should be on the hook if something goes wrong. So why aren't we doing this now? And it's because we haven't been doing this now. We've been operating in the superhero model with the idea that if something breaks, someone else is going to fix it. And so we need to reestablish those expectations with the team if we want them to be successful. If you've been operating the superhero for a really, really long time, you get this bystander effect where everyone assumes that someone else is going to dive in. And we need to set the teams up to understand they're the ones in charge. What this looks like in practice is setting expectations for monitoring, documentation, and training, which I can say really excited and really pow, bam, font, and they are just normal things that we do every day in engineering. The difference is we're setting the expectation of having the teams do these so that they can be set up for success in incidents, because all of the monitoring and documentation are going to be their tools to address when something goes wrong. And you may be saying, Plum, this really isn't like breaking the mold for me. This isn't really disrupting the system. When we're building a user experience for incident response, the goal isn't to disrupt the system. It's to create an experience so that folks can do the jobs that need to be done as seamlessly as possible. So you really want to rely a lot on things that folks are already doing every single day. And we're not really asking folks to do much radically outside what they do, maybe documentation, separate talk, but manager joke, right? The one part that I do want to focus on, though, is the concept of training, because that's going to be our onboarding to our user experience. And that's the place where we're going to have folks step a little bit outside of their normal comfort zone and outside of their day-to-day, both in terms of role and responsibilities and a bit outside of hours. And you were probably wondering when we got there, let's talk about on-call. On-call is that 6-letter, 4-letter word, and it has a lot of negative connotations around it, the idea that someone has to just be available 24/7 to take care of something. Here's the thing. In order for this neighborhood watch to work, in order for this distributed model to work, we need to have everyone participating so we can get the network effects of a giant organization, which means that we need to have this concept of on-call. It's a distributed on-call, though, so you're never going to be the person who is on watch for all of Rotropolis. You're going to be responsible for a specific area that you already know really, really well, and it only works if we have folks in every single one of those areas. That means that we needed to make on-call mandatory for every engineer at Row. In terms of how we implement that in practice, we aren't super prescriptive in terms of how each team implements their own on-call. Some folks have teams that are distributed everywhere between Poland and the West Coast time zone-wise, and so they'll stagger their on-call rotations. For other teams, they do a pretty standard, someone is on call 24/7 once a week, and they rotate through every individual. And that's really all we need. Other than that, it's really up to the team for what works best for their neighborhood. We also make sure that while on-call is mandatory, it isn't like you walk in day one and we're like, here, okay, there's the phone, have fun, bye. What we like to do is make sure we're giving appropriate training for everyone so that they are comfortable. So we don't start them with the big red phone. We start them with the toy phone. There was a lot of debate when we started building this process as to what ready meant for individuals. And I know I mentioned the word comfort before because we talked a lot about comfort. We want folks to be comfortable being on call. Here's the thing. On call is really, really uncomfortable. It's inherently uncomfortable. And I'm not going to stand here today and tell y'all that I cracked the code and figure out how to make on-call fun. Look, the phone is smiling. No. We decided to change the metric and talk instead about confidence. The idea that we want folks to feel confident in their ability to resolve complex issues and understand the different aspects of the application that they may be able to support and the different ways they can triage those applications. The way we establish confidence is through making sure that folks always start off on call after at least 90 days. So we never want someone on day one when they don't even know the names of applications or their teammates trying to debug serious issues. Everyone gets that 90-day period, so they learn basically the street names before they're asked to take patrol over the neighborhood. Second, we make sure to always pair folks with another engineer when they do their first on-call rotation. And they'll only be responsible for things during the daytime, regardless of what their team's actual rotation schedule is. That way, folks get the ability to test out triaging with someone else there as sort of training wheels. It's during the day, so everyone else is online, so there isn't that additional pressure. And folks can learn all the different ropes and see different incidents in practice. Eventually, folks build that confidence, usually after around 2 or 3 rotations, and then they are put on the full-time on-call. But even in that case, they're not alone. And that's the whole reason why we have this neighborhood watch and we keep participation mandatory for everyone. When you're on call for a specific neighborhood, a specific area, which means that you'll always be the first person to respond. Someone is always going to be the first person to get that pager duty or Ops Genie, sorry, I use Ops Genie, alert. And they will have to look into the issue, triage it, and understand what to do next. But on-call doesn't mean you are the only person responsible for resolving an incident. You just have to respond and pull in who else is needed. Sometimes you can resolve. Sometimes you know exactly what to do, where to go, and you can fix the issue no problem. It's pretty likely given that you are on call for your neighborhood. But if for whatever reason you can't resolve it, either it's something you haven't worked with before, or maybe it overlaps with a couple of different areas, you have the full network available to you of folks who are all trained up to be able to assist in this incident response. So no one has to be flying solo, which is where we get our aspects of the distributed ownership, giving us the ability to have teamwork and start to plan for complexity. And sometimes we do hit pretty large issues. In that case, we can rely both on this network and on some additional enhancements to our user experience that we've built in specifically for planning for complexity. The first is robots, because everyone loves a good robot. When we do occasionally triage an issue and find that something has to be really escalated, it can be really stressful for an engineer who's digging through logs, and then they also, I think I have to post in some channel over here, and I should really start a video call, but I'm also trying to look at this other thing. So we make it really simple. We have a single / command that we built as a custom Slack bot, and it will spin up an incident channel, spin up a video call, post in a couple of broad comms channels that something's going on, and also give a notification to our incident leads, we'll talk about in a second. And so the engineer has all of those tools at their disposal and didn't have to really do much work to get it. The bot took care of it. I'll say here that we chose Slack because that's what our users are already using day to day. Slack is what we use for deployments. It's what we use for general communications. So it totally makes sense to put the tool in somewhere that folks already know how to use. There are a bunch of different organizations and apps and startups and plugins that all do the same automation around incident response. And I'm not going to recommend any single one of them because it's what's best for your company and your users. On top of our robots, I mentioned our incident leads. So let's talk about them. This is a separate role that we have established for our most severe incidents. Some call them incident commanders, we call them incident leads. The comic book equivalent to the incident lead is the trope of person in chair, which is this person who is in a basement somewhere with more monitors than a hedge fund analyst, and they're slamming away on the keyboard and they're calling out information to the hero. Our incident lead is similar but a little different. It's similar in that they're usually in a chair and that they are helping out with the incident. It's different in that the incident lead is responsible for everything except the actual technical resolution of the incident. It's an inherently non-technical role. And we do that because there's a lot of context switching involved in complex incidents. It's not just tech. You're getting questions from stakeholders. You're getting trying to call additional people to pull online and that sort of thing. And it really helps when you bifurcate those two paths, when you have one person purely focused on the tech and one person purely focused on the comms. And that's what the incident lead does. The incident lead also has a really, really critical role in the concept of psychological safety in an incident. They are responsible for keeping track of who's online, how long have they been working, what time zones are they in, is someone starting to potentially burn out, you're on the call, and you can see when someone is starting to get a little stressed out. The incident lead's role is to make sure that they're always pulling in new people, so no one person feels that immense pressure to have to be absolutely perfect and to be the hero in that moment. They have the team and the support. And I will say again, it's not like at Row we have incidents every single night where everyone is up for 18 hours on end with incident leads watching through. It's very rare. But the important thing is not only that this role exists, but that everyone on call knows that this role exists, so that they're never going to feel that they have to be flying into anything alone. And that creates the confidence that they need to help resolve these issues. So with all those pieces, we have a response model, a neighborhood watch across our vast Rowtropolis. It's a nice distributed model, and it hits most of our success criteria, but there is a piece missing. And that is the fact that distributed ownership comes with its own downside, which is there are a lot of different gaps and overlaps and places where we have to understand, where do we start? Where are the on-ramps into this incident response model? If our incident is being recognized or first alerted by a robot, like a Datadog or your monitoring system of choice, then it's easy. You can tell the robot, here's where you need to go if this thing happens. It's all logic. But sometimes the first person to see an incident isn't actually a robot. It's a human. So we need to add one more piece to this model to call it to complete, which is a reporting process. So we're going to go back to comic books. The comic book incident response reporting model is really great. You just scream. You scream and someone addresses it. It's perfect. It's simple. But it comes with a bit of downside as well, because it can create a lot of chaos. The screaming model was, ironically, the original model at Row. We had a Slack channel with literally everyone in the company in it, and when you saw something that was wrong, you just posted and said, hey, something's wrong. One of two things happened then. Either no one responded, the bystander effect, or what was actually more likely, 5 different people responded and started like 10 different Slack channels and a bunch of side threads and all these different side conversations, and neither was effective in really efficiently resolving the issue. So we want to enhance upon this model a little bit, but give it all the simplicity of screaming. Oh, there we go. We want to get the right information to the right people as quickly as possible. So to do that, we need enhanced screaming. The bat signal gets a little closer, less loud, but it tells you exactly who you want to call in a specific incident. You want to call Batman. But it still doesn't give that initial information touch point. So we need to go a little more advanced. Once again, we turn to Slack, because Slack, as we've mentioned before, is where a lot of our users already are, both technical and non-technical. We built a very small Slack bot again. It pops up a quick modal and asks someone, where are you and what's going on? They don't need to know our org chart. They don't need to know who's on call. All they need to know is where they are standing right in this moment. And that gives us enough information to be able to route appropriately and to get that on-ramp to our broad network of folks who are ready to jump in. We added one additional enhancement to this because in all of the models, the screaming and the bat signal, there's no sort of response. And when you're someone who is finding a very large or serious incident, it actually creates a lot of pressure on you, especially if you're non-technical, feeling like, oh, I wish what do? I called someone, do I need to call someone else? Like I did this thing, but I don't know what happens next. We alleviate that really quickly by sending a really short automated response that says, thanks, we recognize you reported this issue. Someone is going to be available in 10 to 15 minutes, which is our SLA for responding for these incidents. And please, please don't sign offline. That is absolutely the worst in an incident when someone's like, hey, I saw this thing, it's really weird, I'm going to go, okay, bye, good luck. So we make sure to keep people online so that we can work together with them to resolve this issue. And for the reporter, it's really as simple as the bat signal, but it meets all of our goals of getting the right information to the right people as quickly as possible. So with that piece, we have our full system for reporting and response. And I ran through that in just about 25 minutes, but I will say that in practice, building this user experience took about 6 months of work over the course of a lot of folks in the organization. It was a product investment for our team, but it was something that we need to make. And it was 100% worth it. We set out initially to eliminate our TTN metric, and we did. We no longer had to rely on that single engineer for incidents. I mean, sometimes he still kind of popped in and said hi, but we didn't need him, which was the important point. We also, this is a fun side effect coming off of the documentation and monitoring and expectations around the neighborhood watch, and I think this is wood. I'm going to knock on wood here. Oh, no, it's plastic. We'll go with it. We had less incidents as a result of implementing this process. I've jinxed it now, but we actually saw that we had less incidents. And when we did have incidents, we were able to resolve them more quickly because of all of the systems that we had in place. I will say, just like any other product, this isn't a set it and forget it system. So we put in the 6 months of investment, we saw the results, and we've got to keep continuing to scale it as we do with the business. That doesn't mean that every 6 months we're doing another 6-month effort. We've gotten into more of a maintenance mode, but it still means there needs to be an investment. We have a group of volunteers across the organization, both from our on-call, from engineering leadership, folks who just like playing with bots, hello, that sort of thing. And what they do is about monthly, we'll go through and make sure that all of our automations are up to date. Work with teams to make sure that if new applications have come online, they have the appropriate monitoring and systems in place so they join into our neighborhood watch and to our larger network. We also do user research internally. We talk to different folks within the organization who are on call, send out surveys, and get an understanding of what could be better, what isn't working right now, where their pain points are, so we know where to iterate on this incident response process. And all of these pieces come together so that when there are times of urgency, we can step in and be the heroes. But I think that's what I want to make as a really key point here. As much as I've talked about heroes and villains and all of these metaphors today, bringing it back down to earth, the goal of addressing an incident and the goal of this whole user experience is to make sure that incidents get resolved as quickly and quietly as possible. Like, you really don't want to be flashy. Flashy incidents are never good. You want to be really quiet. And to be quiet, you don't need the hero. You don't need the lone titan and garish spandex. You just need a bunch of everyday regular folks, people who have their own specialties and all of the systems and relationships in place so that in times of danger, when Rotropolis is under threat, folks can join forces and protect their city against bad deploys and rogue semicolons. And that's what I've got for y'all today. Thank you so much, and I'll chat with you in office hours.